Thank you. Hey, so we're going to continue in our little two-part series. Brian Ross is a seminary professor at Fresno Pacific, was one of my professors. He had this brilliant philosophy course that I appreciated so much, and I said, hey, can you take that like 8-week course and turn it into like 2 Sundays? And he said, yeah. And then he reminded me along the way of how hard the task is that I've asked him to do. But I think all of this is so valuable. I appreciate his insight, his thoughtfulness. So we're going to continue in what lies beneath hidden values that are running our life. Can we welcome up Brian?
Most of you in this room do not know me well, but I want to assure you I am a very polite and friendly person. I like to do what is expected of me. I think of myself as a value-add guy. I am literally a team player. I go back to the 90s where I transferred to a small private school and ended up on the basketball team. Our head coach made us practice early in the morning before school when it was still dark. I never missed a practice. Even though at one point I was number 7 in three-point shooting percentage in all of Central Ohio, he removed me from the starting lineup for a few games. I didn't complain at all. I am an agreeable person, after all. But when our head coach, who was super successful, retired, we got a new coach, and I decided I'm going to be his biggest cheerleader. I was the first one to greet him from the team. I let him know how much I wanted him to succeed, because again, I need you to know that I am a pleasant person. But then it's my senior year. Usually what happens is the players vote on who becomes the captains. For some reason, I don't know why, this new coach picked them himself. Guess who he did not pick? Me, the only 3-year starter. I don't know why he did that, but he did. Thankfully, some of the players went and kind of demanded that I be made a captain, so I was as well. And then he put in a new offense, and it didn't work. And we couldn't score very many points. And we began to lose a lot of games. And this was my senior year. And I'm thinking all year, almost every day, rain, sun, or shine, this is in Ohio, outside, would shoot 100 threes every day. And now it's my senior year, and he is ruining it. So at some point, I let him know what I thought. Said, you don't get me. You don't get this team. I don't think you get basketball at all. And then I said a few other words that won't be shared on a Sunday morning. I felt like I had to. He was ruining my senior year. Now again, honestly, I'm a polite and friendly person. But the first time in my life when I'm 18, letting authority know what I thought of them felt great. I was naming my reality. I was naming my experience. I was letting the real me out, and it felt liberating. Have you ever felt like that? I mean, I know you guys are also polite and friendly people, but sometimes in a desire to be free, there are different things we want to do or say, right? I mean, maybe you've said things like, I need to explore who I truly am and determine what I really want. I need to share my story and my own truth. Or I'm an Enneagram 9, so. Or I know this isn't politically correct, but damn it, I think we should. I'm not settling for a boring, ordinary life any longer. It's time that I really go for it. Or I don't care what anyone says. I've got to be authentic to who I truly am. You ever said anything like that? Have you ever thought it? You may not know that, but if you have said it, if you have thought it, most of us have, it's because in some ways we're Nietzscheans. As Ryan said, thankfully, this is our second and final week in a two-part series, What Lies Beneath Hidden Ideas That Are Running Our Lives. As he mentioned, I teach a course. Actually, when I teach it on campus, it's 12 different thinkers we're looking at. We're only doing 2. But looking at some long-dead, brilliant minds whose ideas have created the culture that we live in, even if you've never heard of them. And in particular, I look at them from the angle of how they've created a culture that makes it difficult for us to connect with the Spirit. Again, Ryan asked me to do it. I said it won't work. He asked me again. I'm polite and friendly, so I agreed. But I noticed there's less people here than last week, so maybe I was right. And I say this honestly, tomorrow morning I start to teach an effective communication class online, and everything we are doing today is the opposite of what I say students should do for effective communication. But today we're going to look at another 19th century German, Friedrich Nietzsche, who will self-describe as the first punk rock philosopher. And again, I have a nerdy handout, if we want to go ahead and pass that out. I hope it makes it a little easier to follow along. It can be a little abstract. And as usual, we'll have some time to interact together. So after I am done this morning, if you have a question, a comment, a disagreement, if you want to defend Nietzsche, we can talk about that. All right, I'm going to begin with one of his quotes from Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Now, if this language sounds weird, almost biblical, it's because it's intended to be. Nietzsche's Zarathustra, see if you notice any connections, is 30 years old, and he comes off the mountain with a pronouncement of how people should live. He is intentionally making this character kind of in the place of Jesus. Says, where have gone all my shame, the lying innocence which I once possessed, the innocence of the good and of their noble lies? Too often, verily, did I follow close to the heels of truth, then it did kick me on the face. Oh, my brothers, I direct you to a new nobility. Do not look backward, but ahead. Exiles shall you be from all father and forefather lands. This love shall be your new nobility, the undiscovered land in the most distant sea. For that I bid your sails search and search. Okay, poetic, abstract, trying to sound biblical. What's he saying? Nietzsche's main character is saying, I tried a life of submitting to the rules, of following tradition, of doing what my family wanted or what my parents wanted, and it sucked. It didn't work. I mean, literally, he uses the image of it was a punch to the gut. He says it was like a kick in the face. And he said, I've learned something, and I encourage you, don't follow what other people say. Don't follow the culture. Don't follow the structures put on you. By all means, don't follow your parents or your family. You go for it. You find your best life. And whatever you want, make that a reality. The next passage says, what if some demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, this life as you now live, you will have to live innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or how well disposed would you have to become to life to crave nothing more fervently than this ultimate eternal confirmation? Okay, Nietzsche's doing what's called a thought experiment. He's making something up and wants you to imagine it as a way to get you to think about truth and life differently. And this one, if you're a pop culture fan, you might notice some resonance in the movie Groundhog Day or a few lines in the first season of HBO's True Detective. But he says, imagine a demon shows up to you. And this demon has the power to make you, the life you are living right now, to make you live it over and over and over and over and over. The same life you're living right now. And in Nietzsche's thought experiment, he says, if that thought makes you be like, oh, that would be awful, he would say, then do something about it. Live a better life. What adventure do you want to take on? What's on your bucket list? What do you want to do? Go for it. If that thought sounds awful, it's because you have chosen to live a crappy life. What kind of life would you have to live if the demon showed up and said, this life you're living right now, you're going to live over and over and over, and you'd be like, fine, I feel good about it. Nietzsche's saying, carpe diem, seize the day, grab life, don't conform. Live to the fullest. One final, I promise this is the last one. The most interesting, at least I think so. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace, and cried incessantly, "Whither is God?" he cried. "I will tell you, we have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we enchained this earth from its sun? How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it?" So again, he's using, this is a parable, again, something like a Jesus parable, of the madman who's saying, we have murdered God. Now, Nietzsche doesn't mean this literally. He's an atheist. He doesn't think there was a creator God who's now a victim of homicide. That's not what he thinks. He's using it as an image. He's saying for a long time, Western civilization had Christianity, if not its total foundation, at least as guardrails. Christianity is kind of what gave us some kind of sense of meaning and purpose to life. And here the madman is announcing, we have decided as Western peoples to kill God, to get rid of that, to not live according to that sense of meaning anymore. And the madman says at one point, maybe I've come a little too early, you guys don't realize this yet, but this is practically how people are living. Maybe some people still go to church, but they actually live like God is dead. And the madman's kind of freaked out about it. He's like, this changes everything. It's like wiping away the horizon. It's like unchaining the earth. Like, this changes everything. He's almost afraid of what will happen. And so he says, how do we deal with this new reality? And he's like, you have to become like a god. What does that mean? You have to become a powerful woman, a big man, be larger than life, live your best life, be who you want to be. Make your life extraordinary. That is the only way to live in this world where, practically speaking, at least, it's like God is dead. Now, again, I know you are polite and friendly, and you're also a decent person. But Nietzsche is saying this is why just being a team player doesn't really work. And just being nice and keeping your head down doesn't satisfy us. And if you are alive in 2024 in the US, we are Nietzscheans. Except maybe the Amish, all the rest of us are. We've been raised to be like this. So I want to offer two thoughts on the Nietzschean approach to life. Number one, if we invest our lives seeking our personal wants and our chosen goals, we will likely end up unsatisfied and confused. Unsatisfied and confused. I mean, think about this. You know, if you were privileged enough as a kid to often get something like what you wanted at Christmas, you're excited, you make a list, you write a letter to Santa, you can't wait to get it, then you get it, and it's awesome for like 3 days. And then you're bored. Or if you've been fortunate enough to meet the man or the woman of your dreams, nothing's better. Everything in life seems amazing, for about 18 months, right? Then it begins to wear off. Maybe you have a job that you've always wanted. Now you have the job, you're in it. After a while, you're like, why did I want to do this job? Do I want to stay with it? Even if we get what we want, it's normally not that satisfying. The late philosopher Dallas Willard, he said, the heart of the issue with Nietzsche is truth and its relationship to human freedom. Freedom for Nietzsche means only freedom from, meaning freedom from people trying to control me. So we are condemned to our aloneness. Self-preoccupation becomes our only possibility. And doing what we want is our only conception of human fulfillment. And he says, here's how the prison works. Someone says, what shall I do? And we reply, well, obviously do what you want. And the honest person says, I don't know what I want. What do you want? What do you really want? See, that is how Nietzsche and freedom trap us, because we don't know what we want, and because living beings have to act. Desire as a reasonable human capacity defaults to impulse. We all say we want to be free, to get what we want, to do what we want. But then even if we have choices, we tend to be confused. I mean, how many of you think, what should I really be doing with myself? What should I really do with my life? Even more, John Mark Comer wonders if the rise of depression in our culture, we talked about this last week, can at least partly be attributed to thinking of ourselves as completely free beings. Says the rise of depression grows in tandem with the rise of achievement culture because the depressed person is tired of having to become himself or herself. What if I pick the wrong self to become? What if I don't find my inner self? What if I don't find my inner truth? Now, I want to be clear, most of the time, if you and I have a chance to name goals for the future or our dreams, they're not terrible, selfish things. It's not like I want to do crystal meth and just be a groupie following my favorite band. That's not what we think of. I would like to be a principal of an elementary school, or have 5 children and be a stay-at-home parent. Or I just want to see my grown children have a decent job and have faith and be around the grandkids regularly. But what happens if you can't get that? What happens within you? Worse, what happens if you achieve these things and they're not satisfying? Or maybe even more, what happens in our relationships with other people as we are busy seeking our best life? So my second thought on Nietzsche, number 2, if we invest our lives seeking our personal wants and our chosen goals, it may be difficult to sustain healthy relationships with others. Difficult. I mean, doesn't your experience also show this as well? I mean, there's things I want in life, there's things that you want in life, and most of the time they're not the exact same. I mean, there are billions or maybe literally trillions of ways that human beings could live their life. I want this, you want that. It's hard to stay a connection or have a connection. Even if we make one, it's normally because I'm pursuing this, you're pursuing that, and at least for a time it seems to overlap. But it's hard to maintain that. If I am seeking my best life and you are seeking your best life, it's hard to keep a relationship going. Further, I want you to think for a moment, I know this is not what you want to do on a Sunday morning, but I want you to think about the worst person that you know. Who's the worst person that you know? I know you don't want to think about them, but let them come to mind. You might think of them as a bad person, maybe even as an evil person. The worst person that you know. Do they think that they're a bad person? Do they think they're an evil person? My guess is the inner psychology of the worst person that you know is they simply think this way. My life's been hard and a little unfair. Now is just my chance to get what I want and to be happier. That's right, all they're thinking about. Life's been hard. I got a chance to get what I want. I could be a little happier and achieve my dreams. This is what the philosophy of Nietzsche does to us in our relationships. Now finally, sorry, it's been too long, I'm going to get to Jesus. And Jesus is the opposite of Nietzsche. So much so, again, Nietzsche thinks of himself as a punk rock philosopher. Nietzsche would refer to himself as the Antichrist, as a way of kind of garnering attention. But listen to how different Jesus' words are in Matthew 16, beginning at verse 21. Matthew writes, "From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things, and that he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. 'Never, Lord,' he said. 'This shall never happen to you.' Jesus turned and said to Peter, 'Get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns.' Jesus said to his disciples, 'Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in his Father's glory with his angels, and then he will reward each person according to what they have done.'" I find this to be an incredibly trippy passage. It is the opposite of Nietzsche. It's the opposite of most of us, how we think. Jesus says, I'm going to be rejected by society, I'm going to be murdered, I'm going to be dead, but I'll be raised again. And Peter jumps in and is like, no, you're a good guy. You're supposed to be happy. You're supposed to live life to the fullest. You're supposed to live your best life. You're not doing this. And Jesus calls him Satan, the personification of evil. Says you're only thinking like a human being. If you think what's mainly this is about is how do I have a comfortable life of my dreams, you do not understand. So these are my words here. I think it's in the handout. But Jesus is basically saying if you want to experience the best life, you will feel like you are regularly dying to your authentic desires. That's what it feels like to have the best life. But if you seek out what seems like your best life, in the end, you will have a failed life. Now, I don't know if you're as nerdy as I am, but if you ever do a Google search of like who is the greatest person to ever live, and you could get a Quora or a Reddit list or a list from historians, almost always you're going to see Jesus of Nazareth. That it's not just a Christian thing, that's kind of a most people thing around the globe. But let's remember the life he had. Not easy. Ethnic minority. No money. Not married or had children when that was everything. Never traveled as an adult outside of his home region. Never wrote a book. Never had any official position. Was executed in his early 30s. And almost everyone agrees this is the most influential person in human history who lived the best life. So maybe not seeking our dreams or what is authentic to us is everything. I have another quote I'm going to read here. It's on your handout. It's way too long. But it might be my favorite quote that was originally written in English that I've ever read. This is from the very end of C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. And the reason I like it is because it's so countercultural to us. Here's a relatively modern person who is saying to us what Jesus said, which is the opposite of Nietzsche, which is the opposite of almost all of us. Follow along. It says, the more I try to live on my own, the more I become dominated by my own heredity and upbringing and surroundings and natural desires. In fact, what I so proudly call myself, what I call my wishes, become merely the desires thrown up by my physical organism or pumped into me by other men's thoughts. Until you have given up yourself to him, you will not have a real self. There must be a real giving up of the self. You must throw it away blindly, so to speak. As long as your own personality is what you are bothering about, you are not going to him at all. The very first step is to try to forget about the self altogether. Your real new self, which is Christ and also yours, will not come as long as you are looking for it. It will come when you are looking for him. Give up yourself and you will find your real self. Lose your life and you will save it. Submit to death, death of your ambitions and favorite wishes every day, and death of your whole body in the end. Submit with every fiber of your being and you will find eternal life. Keep back nothing. Nothing that you have not given away will ever be really yours. Nothing in you that has not died will ever be raised from the dead. Look for yourself, and you will find in the long run only hatred, loneliness, despair, rage, ruin, and decay. But look for Christ, and you will find him, and with him everything else thrown in. The exact opposite of Nietzsche, the exact opposite of most of us. One other thing I want to mention, we'll go to interaction time in just a second. So again, if you have a question, comment, if you wanted to defend Nietzsche, that's great. We can interact together. But I want to mention someplace where I think he's right. Nietzsche makes it clear in his writing that if you're going to be a genuine person, a real person, a whole person, you will not live your life blindly submitting to tradition or culture or your family of origin or certainly someone like me. And I think he's right. I want to make that clear. Taking up your cross, or as Jesus said, following me or losing your life does not mean do whatever your pastor or church says. It's not what that means. Again, I'm a polite and friendly person, but I can be wrong about a lot. I'm sure I'm wrong about some things I said today. But if in any way I would teach someone that they need to deny themselves and lose their life to follow what I am saying, then I've become a Nietzschean pastor, which is a contradiction in terms. So again, I can be wrong, but here's my best shorthand to try to consider Nietzsche's influence, Jesus, and what it means. Next slide up there. So a decent but meaningless person. They think, I do what everyone around me wants me to do. My calling is to take marching orders from those who have authority. If they are happy, I am happy. Nietzsche's right. There's no value in thinking this way. A lot of people see problems with that, and that's why they turn to Nietzsche. So a different kind of person, authentic but troubled. I spend my life seeking my dreams and following my passions. My calling is to discover and then be true to the real me. I don't care what others think. This is the American way. This is what many of us do when we've suffered under just submitting to people. It's not the Jesus way. And then finally, the challenged but wonderful person. I live for what is good, which is God. My calling is to take on a way of life that grows more virtue and love within me. This is our calling. And this may or may not align with others' expectations. Okay, that's it. Finally done. The 2 weeks is over. We have some time to interact. If you have a question, comment, thought.
Coming. And just a heads up for timing, we'll probably stick to 2, maybe 3 questions.
I don't have a question. I have a lot of thoughts, actually, about what you said today. I think that these two perspectives are, and I say this respectfully, I think that's a false dichotomy. Okay. I think that, I was actually thinking about this morning, this very thing you're talking about, and I was teaching Sunday school last week, so this is the first time I've heard you speak about this. But I think that pursuing your passions is a reflection of our image in Christ. Okay. God made me to be a maker, to be an artisan, and last weekend we were at the Getty Museum, and I think that reflects the richness of God. I think that we're pursuing to be a creator and to be as amazing as God is, and we know that we can't, but I think that's what Jesus enjoys about humans, is that we have this relentless pursuit to be something just greater. We're always that's what the human condition is, to always want more. And I think that C.S. Lewis is wrong, respectfully. I know he's an amazing theologian, but he's wrong on this, that to give up yourself, I think it's what goal? If you have a selfish ambition, you will come to ruin. And I think Nietzsche's confused about happiness and joy. I think he doesn't know the difference between those two things. Happiness is a fruitless endeavor. It's an emotion. It's fleeting. But joy is eternal, which we're promised by the Holy Spirit, that when we follow God, that he will give us love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, meekness, self-control. Yep. And these are the things that God gives us. And so if you pursue worldly things, which I have, and I made money, and I've pursued fashion and art and all those things, but when your motivation is different, the fruit will be there. And I think that God puts that inside of us. So if you're pursuing medicine, Christ is the great healer. These are all good things from God. And I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it can be both. Be authentic and love Jesus. I think we can do both.
Thank you, Alana. Sorry, I love it. No, it's right.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts.
No, it's good. Yeah, Brian, short response.
We could talk some more if you wanted.
Thank you, Alana.
It's fine to disagree with Lewis. I do think he was echoing Jesus. And it would be fine to say people disagree with Jesus. I think Jesus is right. Now, what you are getting at, I think there's a fine line between what do I do that brings me joy in the sense of God versus what am I doing that is my ambition, my wishes, my desires. And sometimes we can confuse those, but I do think they are two different things. So when you were talking about earlier about being an artisan and the passion, there's a lot of things that didn't make the talk, but one of the things I would say practically is whatever we do, where afterwards we are filled with thankfulness for our life the way it is, and we have more energy to love people that we disagree with, whatever that is, your calling is to do more of that thing. Because that is growing, as you mentioned, the fruit of the Spirit within you. But I think for a lot of us, that might be a part of who we are, but another part of us is I want the corner office. I don't want to just be an artisan, I want to be a well-paid artisan. I don't want to just be a well-paid artisan, I want to be an award-winning, well-paid artisan. And I'm going to do what I have to do that. And that might cause angst within me, that might cause frustration within me, that might cause complexity in my relationships, but I'm going to do that. And that's where I think Lewis, and actually I would say Jesus, is warning against. So it feels like I'm giving up part of me, but I am taking on the real, much deeper me in Christ. That would be my response. Thank you for sharing.
Two things. Real quick, I'm going to invite the worship team to start getting ready. I just want to be mindful of the kids downstairs. And then thank you both for modeling what it looks like to say different things, to have boldness to disagree and still stay connected and have conversation. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Maybe one more and then a quick response from Brian. Back. Yep.
So I know Nietzsche is very critical of religion in general. But what does he say about Jesus? Is he critical of Jesus or just religion?
He doesn't go into Jesus a whole lot. There are some theologians who I think they really like Nietzsche. And honestly, I have to admit, Nietzsche reminds me of the pre-Christian me. When I read him, I'm like, oh, I remember thinking that way. So there are some theologians that try to defend him. He said things like there was only one true Christian, and he was crucified. There are times he has statements that sounds like he gives a little bit of a nod, because Nietzsche wants us to be authentic individuals that live as we see best. So if that's what Jesus did, good for him. But just thinking we're supposed to follow that is giving up on the true way. And he uses strong language. I mean, he would call Christianity slave morality. We are choosing to act like a slave, and a real authentic person is more like a master. So he uses some strong language, but okay.
Can we thank Brian?